There's a kind of American joke nobody tells out loud. The night we celebrate freedom is the night I disappear from my own front yard. That sounds ungrateful. It sounds dramatic, but it's the cleanest way I can say it. Because on the 4th of July, out here in suburbia, string lights on porches, kids running with glow sticks, grills hissing, somebody's playlist bleeding into the warm air, the first real mortar goes off and my body stops belonging to this neighborhood. I'm still standing there. I'm still wearing the same face. But inside, I'm no longer a husband. I'm no longer a neighbor. I'm no longer back in the world. I become a set of reflexes searching for a reason. And here's the question I never ask at the cookout, the question I keep folded up in my pocket like a blade I don't want to open. If a holiday turns me into a risk, what do I owe the people standing closest to me? On my kitchen shelf, there's a small glass jar. It used to hold something ordinary, pickles, maybe. Now it holds foam earplugs, cheap ones. The kind you roll between your fingers until they're thin, then you stick them in and wait for them to expand, like the world is being slowly packed away. I keep that jar where I can see it, not because I forget it exists, because looking at it reminds me that I have a choice. That's a funny word choice. People say it like it's free, like it doesn't come with consequences, like it doesn't cost anyone else. Most days my choices are small. Which road to take? Whether I sit on the porch or in the quiet back room? Whether I turn the TV on low just to give my brain something steady to hold? But on the 4th, choice feels like a test. It starts before dark now. Somebody down the street decides 1 or 2 won't hurt. A sharp crack, then another. The sound bounces off siding, skitters across windows, and your whole neighborhood becomes a drum. My wife used to watch my eyes when it happened, not like a nurse, not like a judge, like someone learning a weather pattern. She learned how long it takes me to come back. She got good at pretending not to notice. I got good at pretending I never left. Just fireworks, she'll say, calm, like she's narrating for a child. And I'll nod like a man nodding at rain. But my body doesn't hear fireworks. My body hears distance, direction, the space between booms. My body hears the moment right before something happens. People talk about PTSD like it's a ghost story, like it's a thing that haunts you only at night, like it's a single memory that jumps out of a closet. Most days it's not a ghost, it's a system. It's your brain doing its job too well. It's a guard dog that never got the message the burglar moved away. The bush taught me that. Not in speeches, in repetition. In the way you learn to measure life in seconds instead of minutes. In the way you learn to watch shadows like they're decisions. In the way your hands learn to move before your thoughts can argue. And that's the cruel part. You come home and your hands are still trained. Fireworks aren't artillery. Anybody can tell the difference. But your nervous system doesn't critique sound like a music expert. It listens like an animal. It listens for threat. It listens for pattern. It listens for the thing that once meant your life might end in the next 30 seconds. And suburban fireworks have no discipline. No structure, no predictability, just joy, alcohol, and randomness. Randomness is what breaks you. So I developed a plan. I don't call it a routine. Routine sounds cute. I call it what it is, a survival plan. Late afternoon, I check the locks. Not because I expect a break-in, because I need to hear the click. I make sure the dog's collar is on. I close curtains, but I leave one narrow slit so I can see the street without being seen. I move the jar of earplugs closer to the edge of the shelf like a tool I might need fast. Then I do the normal things, the respectable things, the husband things. I carry trays. I smile. I talk about lawn care. I laugh at the same jokes everyone laughs at. I keep my hands busy because busy hands don't betray you as easily. At dusk, the street changes. You can smell charcoal, lighter fluid, cut grass, and that first bitter hint of powder. Kids get louder, adults get looser. Music gets turned up like volume can drown out whatever silence might reveal, and the sky goes that deep blue, beautiful enough to make you believe nothing bad has ever happened under it. That's usually when I slip inside. Not dramatically, no announcement, just a quiet exit like I forgot the oven. Inside, I can control the world a little better. The refrigerator hums. The vents breathe. The floors are familiar. I stand in the hallway where there are no windows, and the sound arrives muted, like distant weather. Sometimes I put the earplugs in early. Sometimes I wait, like I'm bargaining with my pride. Like if I can last 10 minutes without them, it means I'm winning. That's the trap, turning survival into pride. Because earplugs don't just block sound, they block people. They block my wife calling my name. They block the ordinary proof that I'm home. They turn the world into a silent movie where the only thing I can hear clearly is my own head. And my own head is not celebrating anything. The first fourth after I came back, I tried to do it right. I sat outside. I smiled. I clapped when the sky bloomed. My brother-in-law handed me a sparkler and said, "Here, kid," like the world was simple again. I held it between two fingers and watched it hiss and spit. It should have been harmless. It was harmless. But my hand didn't know that. My wrist locked. My throat went dry. My heart started pounding like it was trying to escape my ribs. I stood up too fast, like my body was leaving without permission. My wife touched my arm, just a small touch, gentle, normal. And I flinched. Not away from her, not at her, just flinched. That was the first time I saw something break in her face. Not anger, not fear, recognition. She realized she couldn't love this out of me. That moment, quiet as it looked, was the real explosion. Because that's when you understand the war doesn't end when you stop hearing it. It ends when the people who love you stop getting cut by it. Or when you learn to carry it without bleeding on them. Over the years, I got smarter. I got quieter. I got good at disappearing in plain sight. I became the guy who doesn't really care for fireworks, the guy who turns in early, the guy who volunteers to clean up plates, the guy who stands near a wall because it calms his body, even if he can't explain why. And I learned something about suburbia. People think danger comes from outside. A stranger, a break-in, a headline. They don't think danger can come from the man they wave at every morning. But I know what a man can become when sound turns into a command. That's why the fourth scares me. Not because it reminds me of the past, because it reveals my potential. Then the neighborhood changed, the way neighborhoods always change. Time moved forward, kids grew, new families arrived, and the fireworks got bigger, louder, earlier. One year, a new family's teen son and his friends set up in the street like it belonged to them. Not little pops, full mortars that made the windows buzz. Car alarms joined in like a choir. I told myself, stay inside. Don't be the old man yelling at kids. Don't make it a thing. My wife sat on the couch, pretending to watch a movie. The dog paced. I stood in the hallway with my eyes on that narrow slit of window. Then I heard it. Not a boom. A whistle. High and rising thin. Sharp. Intimate. That sound crawled up my spine like a finger. My throat closed. My hands went numb. My feet moved before my mind voted. I was outside. I don't remember opening the door. I remember the slap of night air, the smell of powder, and the street lit up by quick flashes like lightning. The boys were laughing, filming on their phones, passing around a box like it was treasure. I yelled. Not a sentence, just a sound. A command that didn't belong in this neighborhood. They turned, annoyed, surprised. One of them said, "Relax, man. Relax. That word is gasoline." I stepped forward. I shouldn't have. I know that now. "Put it down," I said, and my voice didn't sound like me. It sounded older, harder. He lit the fuse anyway. The boom hit me in the ribs like a shove. The boys cheered, and my body did what it was trained to do. It looked for the next one. My eyes found the box on the asphalt. My feet moved toward it. I grabbed the box. Cardboard doesn't weigh much, but in my hands it felt like responsibility heavy, absolute, like stopping a chain before it starts. One of the boys lunged. "Hey!" We both grabbed it for a second, tugging like it was a suitcase. That's when my wife's voice cut through the noise. My name. Not screamed, not panicked, firm, like a rope thrown into water. I looked back and saw her on the porch, barefoot, face pale in the flashing light. And I saw doors opening up, and neighbors stepping out, people witnessing a story they didn't understand yet, already choosing sides. Now it didn't look like safety. It looked like a grown man stealing fireworks from kids. It looked like anger. It looked like a man who couldn't control himself. So I did something that still sits ugly in my stomach. I called the police. In my head it was simple. Illegal fireworks, neighborhood safety, stop the danger. But morality gets complicated when you invite uniforms into a holiday. The squad car showed up and painted the houses red and blue, another kind of celebration. Colder. The officer asked me to set the box down. I should have done it instantly. But my hands didn't want to let go, because letting go felt like letting the threat restart. I set it down anyway, and I felt something inside me collapse, like I'd been holding up a roof beam and suddenly the house might fall. The boys talked fast. Their parents showed up angry and embarrassed. A father looked at me like I'd attacked his family. And here's the mess, son. He wasn't entirely wrong. Because my fear turned into authority. My authority turned into consequences. And those consequences landed on people who weren't evil. They were careless. They were young. They were doing what a lot of people do on the 4th. I went back inside with my wife while the neighborhood kept celebrating. But the damage wasn't the noise. It was the look in that father's eyes. And the way my wife closed the door like she was sealing us in from the whole street. After that, waves got smaller. Invitations faded. Conversations shortened. Not because people hated me, because discomfort is contagious. Nobody wants complicated near their burgers and laughter. Nobody wants to admit harmless fun can be someone else's nightmare. Nobody wants to stare at the part of America that doesn't fit on a postcard, and I don't blame them. Suburbia is built for comfort. Clean lawns, bright holidays, the belief that if you follow the rules, complexity won't climb over your fence. But complexity is patient. The next 4th, I didn't go outside at all. I told my wife I had a headache. She didn't argue. She just sat with me in the hallway, both of us listening to the booms like a storm we couldn't outrun. That's when I finally admitted the real truth. The 4th of July isn't the scariest night because it sounds like war. It's the scariest night because it shows me what I might do to feel safe. Not the memories, the potential. You spend enough time learning survival, you start believing survival is the highest good. You start believing safety justifies anything. You start believing the world should adjust to your nervous system because you once had to adjust to the world's worst day. That's where right and wrong stop being clean. Those boys weren't trying to hurt me. They weren't thinking about me at all. They were thinking about the sky and the thrill of doing something forbidden. I was the one who made it serious. I was the one who brought consequences. I was the one who turned a celebration into a courtroom. So what do I do now? I'll tell you, and I won't dress it up like wisdom. I keep the jar of earplugs where I can see it. On the 4th, I put 2 in my pocket early, not as surrender, as preparation. I sit outside with my wife long enough to prove I'm still here, long enough for her to see my eyes and know I'm not leaving her alone with it. Then, when the big ones start, I excuse myself without shame. I go to the laundry room. I close the door. I turn on the dryer even if there's nothing inside, because the steady hum gives my brain something honest to hold. I put in the earplugs, and the world goes muffled. And in that muffled quiet, I do the hardest thing. I don't fantasize about stopping the neighborhood. I don't rehearse speeches about respect. I don't build arguments about how people should behave. I watch myself. I pay attention to the moment my hands want control. Because control is the true addiction. Not noise, not fear. Control. I think about that kid's face, the disgust. I think about the father's eyes. I think about my wife barefoot on the porch saying my name like she was calling me back from a ledge. And I ask myself a question that never mattered in the places where you learn reflexes. What kind of man am I? If the people closest to me have to fear my fear. That's the confession. That's the part that reframes the whole holiday. It isn't just that fireworks send me back, it's that fireworks reveal how close survival can sit to harm if you let your body drive. Some years after midnight, when the street finally quiets, I take the earplugs out and the world rushes back in like water. I pull the curtain, slit open a little wider, and look out at the road. Cardboard tubes, paper scraps, smoke hanging low under the streetlights, the air smelling like burned sugar and chemistry. I'll see a neighbor, maybe that same father, maybe somebody else sweeping his driveway. Not angry, just tired. And I'll think, that's America too. Celebration and cleanup. Noise and consequence. I put the earplugs back in the jar. I wash my hands. I check the locks again just to hear the click. My wife is asleep. Or pretending to be. I stand in the hallway and listen to the last distant pops like echoes from another town. And I wonder what we're really celebrating. Not the speeches. Not the symbols. The ordinary people who get to be careless because the world held long enough for them to forget it can break. The neighbors who light up the sky because they believe the sky is safe, and men like me, in the shadows, trying to be grateful without becoming dangerous. So, here's where I'll leave you. No lesson, no sermon. Just a question that doesn't let me go. When the sound of freedom makes you flinch, when you reach for control to quiet your own body, who pays for that comfort? And if you're honest, would you still call it survival if the cost is someone else's innocence? If you've ever lived with a reaction you didn't ask for, or you've ever stood near someone who carries one, tell me in the comments what your 4th of July is. The night that looks normal to everybody else, but feels like a private storm inside you. And if you want more stories like this, quiet, grounded, and honest, subscribe. Not for noise, for the things we don't say out loud until the house is finally still.